Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to our next in our Upcycled Food Month series of webinars. Turn your sustainability efforts into a competitive edge. I am Amanda Owenbring, CEO of Upcycled Food Association, and so glad to have you here with us today or watching the recording in the coming days. And let's dive right on in. So, you are here at one event in a really beautiful series that's come together across the month of June 2025. We invite you to visit our landing page, upcycledfoodmonth.org, to view the recordings of events that have already happened or dive into our upcoming events ahead. We've got another great webinar coming up on Tuesday, as well as we're really excited to mark actual Upcycling Day, June 24th, with a lot of our community at the ReFed Food Waste Solutions Summit in Seattle. So if you're there, please do reach out and let us know. As well as right around the bend as we move into July, IFT First Trade Show in Chicago. We had a wonderful last 2 days, so my brain is brimming with all things global upcycled food, and that we marked the moment of the kickoff of our Upcycled Food Foundation Global Upcycled Food Research Community. And our kickoff to that was a 2-day deep dive symposium of scholars, students, researchers from across the globe coming together to really share the latest of upcycled food, qualitative and quantitative research. So invite you. We had so much fun. We're going to do it again to join us in this coming September. Submission, presentation, proposals will be opening up soon. So I invite you to join us, whether it's an attendee or to share more about your work. And you can learn more at the link here. So just a couple quick housekeeping notes as we get started. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to our attendees as well as to UFA members. As we move through the webinar, we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom. And the follow-up email will include all sorts of information and resources about how to contact our wonderful speakers today. So here's just a quick peek at our next hour ahead. We'll do our kickoff here, move into a couple collaborative conversations, and then a broader group discussion and time at the end for Q&A. So definitely welcome your questions throughout the conversations, and then we'll come back to them at the end of our time. So, to get started here, such a pleasure to be joined by so many wonderful minds and leaders in the upcycled food space. It's been a pleasure to have all of these representatives as members of UFA. So, starting off first with Maggie O'Connor, Senior Manager of ESG at Del Monte Foods. Also joined by Julia Collins and Miranda Gorman. Julia is founder and CEO of Planet Forward, and Miranda is head of Climate Solutions and Science. And last but not least, Anna Hammond, founder and CEO of Matriark Foods. So really excited for you to get to know them a little bit better, hear more about their work. So I'm going to bring on screen Maggie and to talk about Del Monte and their commitment to upcycling. So Maggie, welcome. So good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. And thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to speak to the group and be part of the conversation.
Wow, thank you so much for being here. And as we, get to know you as a person, would love to hear a little bit about your role at Del Monte and what personal passions brings you to this work that you invest in all the great work you do across what you steward at Del Monte.
Yeah. So as mentioned, I lead ESG at Del Monte Foods, which spans a lot of different focus areas. But top of mind for this conversation is measuring and reducing our carbon footprint, including through initiatives like food waste reduction and upcycling. I've been involved in food systems for 10 years now, from a few different angles and perspectives, including research and food access, as well as corporate sustainability. So what excites me about ESG and my current role is not only kind of the fusion of all of those different interests, but also I just feel like businesses have such a massive potential to do good for not only the planet, but also for people and communities. And that's really what motivates me, my current role.
Mm. So appreciate that perspective. And I think that's a through line across all of us on this call today, just really seeing the vast potential and opportunity our food systems brings across so many different challenges we face as a society. It's been so fun to connect with your team and follow your upcycle journey. I had a lovely conversation just this fall to really reflect back on where Del Monte has been championing upcycling. So would love to hear from you some of what that journey has been. We have some of these highlights here on screen, but when we think about all the impacts you're stewarding across Del Monte Foods, how does upcycling play a role within that?
Yeah. So at Del Monte, we see ourselves as growers of good, and we are on a mission to responsibly make nutritious foods more accessible to all, which is a big mission, definitely. And through our ESG efforts, we kind of break it into three pillars: so nourishing people, nourishing planet, and nourishing community. And upcycling touches really all three of these. Um, Focusing particularly on nourishing the planet. I mean, we all know what a huge issue food waste plays, particularly the greenhouse gas associated with it. Um, and so when we have products that are not being used simply because, maybe they're not the right size or the right cut, or maybe they just haven't been thought of as an input before, that impacts our business and our ability to meet our climate goals, as well as just like the common sense of it all, and our ability to be growers of good. Um, so that's really kind of what has motivated our passion and our interest in upcycling. Uh, so while some food waste in our supply chain may be unavoidable, we're really kind of on a mission to help ensure that food is reaching its highest and best use case of going towards human consumption, and also kind of taking advantage of that opportunity to create more delicious and exciting food and beverage products that people can enjoy.
I think that's what's been so exciting as we think about really where upcycling is now and where it's going, of really seeing a lot of a narrative emerge of just resourcefulness, right? And it's coming back to that highest and best use that we champion here at UFA and seeing the ways that our members really bring that to life. So I think we have some great examples here on screen, as growers of good, like you mentioned, Del Monte Foods is actively seeking ways to redirect all the different inputs that then get transformed into some of these lovely products. So tell us about what that journey has been and maybe give us some of the most recent headlines we're excited to be celebrating here on screen.
Yeah, happy to. Our upcycling journeys officially started in 2021 with some of our upcycled green bean products. Del Monte has been in the green bean game for quite some time. We've developed a really strong kind of pride behind our green beans. There are company standards in place that reflect, our what our customers have come to expect when they open a can of Del Monte green beans. Unfortunately, sometimes that means that smaller cuts or end pieces, things like that, don't make it into our more traditional green bean products. But the team here really was able to take up that challenge, and in 2021 developed three new green bean products that could encapsulate the smaller cuts and those end pieces, um, keeping that product within the human supply chain, creating three new products, and making sure that that is something that is able to be eaten by humans rather than being sent to animal feed or land spreading. Um, and then most recently, you can see on the screen, our Joyba products were certified upcycled just recently in 2025. Joyba is our bubble tea line. If you're not familiar, there are 9 different flavors. Um, as part of the bubble tea, there are, of course, the little bubbles that are in it. And in our manufacturing, those bubbles are shipped to our plant kind of in a liquid to keep them safe. And the team realized that that liquid, rather than being, thrown down the drain and wasted, could actually be used in the product as a sweetener.
Mm.
Our R&D team was able to kind of troubleshoot this and figure out a way to make that work, which was not only a win-win in reducing our food waste, but also eliminated the need to purchase additional sweeteners to incorporate into the product. Um, and I think both of those examples hopefully are really highlighting the fact that this has been very much a team effort. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's really collaborative, and we've been so lucky at Del Monte to have an incredible R&D team, our ops team, our marketing. There's really been so many stakeholders um, who have helped support our upcycled mission, and really shows that sustainability is something that is so core to what goes on at Del Monte. Um, and then kind of reflecting on our journey as a whole, I would say so far we've kind of been in this like step one phase of really taking action, doing that product innovation, figuring out where the opportunities lie, and that's work that will continue. Um, I think next up for Del Monte, beyond looking for those other opportunities, is really kind of transitioning into like that measurement phase. We know that this is a win-win for us. We've been so excited about it, but really being able to put numbers to that and show how this is reflected in our company's carbon footprint, um, is really what's next up for us, and something I'm excited to tackle.
Mm. Well, thank you. It's so fun to see the journey because it is a journey and all the things that go into both that spark of inspiration. I think, both the product stories you talked us through show really the range of kind of your everyday products that maybe every demographic, every age might be purchasing and enjoying, where it just makes sense, right? When you think about picking the green beans out of your garden, you have every shape and size that nature gives us. So really capturing that. And then to more of that, innovation forward, millennial kind of facing product where, they get it and more they're making those purchasing decisions around what that is. So really thank you for bringing both those to life and showing, the progress over time and really excited to see these numbers and this commitment grow. So thanks for sharing that, Maggie. And the
Absolutely.
stories that numbers can tell is what we're really here, to showcase today. So with that, I'm going to transition over and invite Julia and Miranda and Anna on screen to talk a little bit about their work together and how that's helped bring the Matriark story to life in some really amazing ways. So welcome to these three.
Thank you. Yeah, let's bring this all to life with the amazing story of Anna and Matriarch. I wanted to let everyone know that I'm really happy to be joined by Dr. Miranda Gorman, our head of climate solutions and science at Planet Forward, as well as Anna Hammond from Matriarch, who's the founder and CEO. I think anybody in our community is very familiar with Anna and the amazing work at Matriarch, but we're going to go a little bit of a level deeper than what you might already know. Anna's been a longtime partner to Planet Forward and is an example of how you can really turn upcycling into a climate solution. So Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you. Would love to hear a little bit about where you were as a founder and where Matriarch was as a company when we met a couple of years ago, and kind of what brought you to Planet Forward in those years.
Yeah, so happy to be here. And when I met Kylan, actually, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Matriarch was, I think, maybe a 1.5, 2-year-old company. And we were founding members of the Upcycled Food Association. So there's a kind of, reason we're all kind of in this together. Unlike companies like Del Monte that are thinking about upcycled as, later in their journey of being a company, and when we were talking earlier, Maggie and I were saying with like 100-year-old company, five-year-old company sort of coming together to make these changes and how important that is. But in a way, for us, it's easier because the core of our business is this thing. But the challenge always is proving why does it mean anything to the outside world, as a differentiator from an environmental perspective. So the upcycled certification certainly incredibly important, and getting that out in the world and sort of validating upcycled as an activity and a concept. But when I met the Planet Forward team, we really talked about how can we make our product lines fully transparent, the best they can be from an environmental impact perspective. And so, met with the team and really looked at the incredibly deep dive they were doing to collect data and make, scientific validation of products' environmental impacts. So, we were still pretty young. We had products in one market that was 4 years ago, I guess. Now we have products in 4 markets. And the LCA work that we've done with Planet Forward has been one of the really important reasons for our growth.
Yeah, it's been really a journey working with you, Anna, over the past few years. And where we were when we started in the first year was really just, like you said, focusing on measurements. So what we did was we looked at your SKUs that you had, the upcycled tomato sauce, the gentle marinara, all of these different types of SKUs, and we really just wanted to focus on measuring what the impact was to help you communicate that clearly to your consumers, but also to your buyers, the food service buyers. So the impact, as we all know, is if you took these ingredients that would otherwise go to waste, and you're using them in a final product, we know that there have to be environmental benefits, but how can we really quantify what that impact is? And so the benefit of what we can do with models that are custom and that are really bespoke to every single different product, and you're not using off-the-shelf emissions factors, is that we can build something that's truly representative of your product and quantify the benefits of what that actually looks like. So we were able to, in the first year, measure the impact of Matriark's upcycled products and also what the conventional alternatives were, including the replacement of the upcycled vegetables with conventional vegetables, including decisions that Anna, that you were making about packaging and all of those different types of things. And so that was really intended to sort of give you defensible data, like you said, to communicate to your customers, but also for institutional buyers.
Yeah, and I guess that's, the sort of key point there is institutional buyers are tracking their scope 3. Consumers are not, but it works for both, sort of having that validation, especially in an era of lots of factoids out there, I like to call them, is doubly important, and it really is a differentiator, particularly in sort of the food service arena, but also growingly in the ingredient arena.
Yeah. So the other thing that we were able to do, these are some of the key outcomes from the work that we've done, and it's something where we are updating these results year over year when different decisions are being made. So like just recently, we completed an update where we looked at, Anna, you guys had made a shift from Tetra Pak for some of your sauces to glass, so we updated some of these results. And we want to make sure that we're iterating on the process year over year. So some of the things that we were able to find were significant decreases in emissions from the conventional product, like I mentioned. And these are some of the meaningful impacts that we were able to do. We're also able to highlight emissions reduction opportunities to continue to push forward sustainability efforts. So beyond just measuring where you were in the first year, as we move forward to the next year and the year after, we wanted to start thinking about where there are emissions reductions opportunities. How can we, identify opportunities, not just for your brand, but for all of our customers, where you might be able to source from different processors or suppliers, or use lower emissions practices, or what are good packaging options that might reduce emissions. So making sure that you're looking not just at your baseline, but continuing to move forward to the ultimate goal of the most sustainable, lowest emissions product possible.
Yeah, I have a good example of that. I mean, I love it when people ask me about the process of getting LCAs done. I say first get a great smart intern who can help you, with all the papers and things you have to gather to, to put it, because it does take time and energy and totally worthwhile. But when when we did the first pass on the LCAs of our passata, it's mostly upcycled tomatoes, but we add a little bit of tomato paste for the processing, and a little bit of roasted garlic and salt for flavor. And we saw that how the place we were sourcing our tomato paste from was increasing the impact of the product by just an insane amount compared to other tomato paste that we could source. And so we changed the sourcing of that paste to lower the impact of the product. So, it's sort of like learning to balance a checkbook or manage your money really well. Like, you should know where your banks are. You should know what what the interest is on everything, because if you care about the impact, there always will be surprising ways that you can lower it by changing things out. So it is an iterative process, and just kind of keeps you awake in it.
Yeah. So now you're entering year 3 of that iterative process. You've done this amazing foundational work of collecting the data, identifying your hotspots, kind of the magical work of weaving all of that data into really powerful storytelling that matters to your consumer at the point of purchase, storytelling that helps your food service buyers to make progress on their scope 3 commitments. I mean, there's so much great foundational work that you've already done, and as you look ahead to year 3, what are you looking forward to? How does this work continue to take shape at this phase in your organization?
Yeah, well, maybe you want to put the next slide up. So really, I mean, it's been incredibly exciting what having the data has allowed us to do in terms of even opening up questions. I think we, often get started, obviously we're an environmental impact food company. We've been certified upcycled since the beginning. And we get a lot of incoming calls from companies that are interested in what we're doing, how we're doing it, how they might integrate what we're doing into their operations. But it's really been an important growth factor in, two particular ways in the last year, and there'll be another that I'll mention in a second that's not up on this slide. But one is, we got contracted with Vizient, which is the largest provider of health care meals in the US. They work with private hospitals, public hospitals, prisons, schools, etc. And they were attracted to our products because of the health components. They're all low sodium, they're vegetable forward, they're answering all of those things, but they have very big scope 3 targets as a company. And so because we had the LCAs in addition to the upcycled certification, we were able to go through the 18-month legal process of becoming an environmentally preferred supplier. And what that means is that you can search in their database for products and find products that are environmentally preferred. And, a lot of it is packaging. More and more is starting to relate to food. So that's, a big growth area for us. And despite what's happening out there right now in terms of sustainability and diverse suppliers, we're, you know, still getting a lot of traction there because global companies have to report scope 3, and that's not going to change. And then another very exciting development is a relationship that we've developed with Custom Culinary, which is part of Griffith Food, also a global food ingredient company. And I met someone there from the team actually 2 years ago now at Menus of Change at the Culinary Institute of America, and we got to talking about, you know, products and their goals as a company to reduce food waste and reduce emissions and nourish the undernourished. And so we started a pilot with them integrating one of our ingredients that we use in our products, a liquid mirepoix, which is 100% upcycled product, carrot, celery, and onion remnants. And we started out with 50,000 pounds testing, you know, all of that. And then it became so successful that they decided to integrate that ingredient in 3 new SKUs that they're bringing to market for college and university, and in another sort of standard SKU that they have. You know, partly I think you know, obviously the flavor is great, but also because it could be part of their commitment to reducing food waste globally. And now we're expanding that partnership in more product development, looking at more upcycled ingredients, but also always with the data-backed information. In fact, yesterday I had a meeting with their head of sustainability and head of partnerships and marketing, and we walked the sustainability team through the upcycled, how we do all of that. But then when it came to the life cycle analysis, that was kind of the clincher in the relationship, because they can prove to everyone in the company that the impact is what we say it is. So, you know, so that's just been really, really exciting, and there's a lot of, you know, potential future growth there. And then we've been, for the last couple of years, working in the emergency food and food bank space. We launched a product 2 years ago for Feeding New York State, which is a vegetable harvest stew, some of it sourced from surplus from New York State farmers, and we're expanding that work with Feeding New York State in the coming year, doing a landscape analysis of on-farm surplus with some of the farmers that they already work with that are donating product to them, and developing a couple of more products as well, also backed with all of the data. So yeah, it's a path to the real, I think, you know, which we really need right now.
Yeah. I mean, all of this is really incredible and powerful. And I think of the brands who are working in this space, Matriark is an example of really being able to unlock an omni-channel strategy, you know, emergency food service, hospital. I mean, there's so many channels that are incredibly hard to break into, and your focus on doing the right thing and quantifying it seems to be an important catalyst for you to be able to access these additional channels as drivers of growth. So I think that's just incredibly impressive, frankly, Anna. You know, one of the things that I wanted to say as we close, and I love these case studies around Del Monte and Matriark, because it can be helpful to see how you know, really brings these solutions to life. But given that we are here at the Upcycled Food Association convening, I wanted to just maybe speak to also the power of doing this work in community with others, you know, and really making sure that we're building bridges across organizations and across brands to take collective action. And that's something, Anna, that you've also done incredibly well. I think there's a bigger story to tell when we tell these stories together than individually as brands. And I think continuing to uplift the importance of upcycling is something that can help us all go a little bit further and faster. So really just encouraging all UFA members and folks who are considering UFA membership to make sure that you're reaching out to other founders in your stable and in your network so that we can be doing this work as a movement and not just as individuals. think now we're going to move into a guided discussion. But thanks so much again, Anna and Miranda, for the incredible work that you've been doing in partnership and for bringing it to the audience today. Want to just call out that we are excited to be extending an offer to all UFA members. You can see that offer here. So please feel free to scan the QR code that you see on this slide. And I think Jake from our team has also pinned it in the chat.
Well, thank you so much to each of you for adding that perspective. A special thanks to Planet Forward for helping be the keeper of that community baseline. It is such a hope and dream with the beautiful stories like Anna's, with other work you've done across UFA members, to really think about how can we as an industry, how can we as a community be showing the differentiator that upcycling is to all the stakeholders that you just mentioned, Anna, and how that really weaves into your story. So want to open it up for, a couple different topics across the themes that we're exploring today. Also welcome you to drop your questions into the chat as we move through this conversation. So really want to get us started with, just at that broader level, why does good data matter? We've talked about how it can unlock storytelling, how it can unlock innovation, but really from your perspective, this takes time, it takes investment, it takes, intentionality, and would love to hear what that question brings up for you. So, how about Maggie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. I would say that data is becoming more important every day in the sustainability space. There's a lot of scrutiny happening right now across the industry, and really the only way around it is to have really good data to back up, any claims that you're making. And beyond that, data is just one of the best ways to measure progress, to see if your actions are actually helping you get to your goals. Um, there's really no other way to measure that without good data. And I would say, especially for companies like Del Monte that maybe have a science-based target or any other type of climate target, the more granular your data is really the only way to help you measure and show progress towards your goals. I think a lot of companies start off with using kind of industry average data, and that's an incredible starting point, but it's not going to reflect the actions that your company specifically is taking. Like Miranda was mentioning, like it really has to reflect your business specifically to help you get to that point. And the better data you have, the better you'll be able to measure your progress, and also to help get buy-in across the company to get to tell the story and really get leadership and other internal stakeholders involved.
And I appreciate how you connected the dots of how it's helped to guide your innovation, whether it be that continuous improvements, the tomato paste story, but how else has data really been influential in your journey as an entrepreneur?
I mean, I think, one thing that is always bears noting is that data is changing. It's like buying a house, it sort of amortizes and changes over its lifetime. And and one's relationship to your data is an alive thing. It's not just like, oh, I measure this thing today and then tomorrow it's the same, and in 3 years it's the same. And I think particularly in the upcycled space, I mean, upcycled is not a new concept, and no company is like the first upcycled company on earth. It's been happening for literally thousands of years. But in terms of sort of the impacts of it, because everyone who's doing it is doing it for, right now, maybe it's to differentiate on story, maybe it's because you just can't stand food waste, but also at the bottom, or at the, sort of at the end of the day, we know the negative impact that food waste has on global warming, and even if you don't believe in global warming, that the negative impact that food waste has on your bottom line. So, now speed, I mean, I always say, like, we're creating efficiencies out of the inefficiencies of efficiencies, because at one time didn't matter if you just threw stuff on the floor because there was so much of it. It wasn't costing you, it would cost you more to save that thing than to throw it out. And now we know there's a huge environmental impact and there's a cost of that. And increasingly, the cost of the thing is starting to meet up with the cost of saving the thing. So, you know, I mean, I'm not really answering your question specifically, like adding on to my previous sort of journey of why data is so important, but it's rooted in real business and real environmental impact. And when those two things merge, and people kind of get on board to do them, you're going to save money and you're going to have better environmental outcomes. And you can't really do that without knowing what you're doing. You can't do that if you don't know what you're throwing out, you're not measuring it. You can't do that if you don't know what the impacts are of what you're saving and doing something else with and generating more revenue from. So, data is queen. And I think that's, that it can drive all of those decisions.
Really having that be the guiding light. Julia, you and your team are stewarding that across so many different companies at different points in their own journey. Talk a little bit about what that means to you and the team.
Yeah, one of the things that we say at Planet Forward is ultimately we're helping our customers use data to see the unseen. And that in seeing the unseen, they can then understand what to do next. No matter how much climate knowledge you have, it is really hard to conceptualize carbon. It is an odorless, colorless, tasteless gas. If I asked you what a kilogram of CO2 equivalents look like, what would you make your hands like this? Would you make a balloon size? Would you imagine it's the size of a city block? It's very hard to wrap your mind as a sustainability leader around the impact, let alone drive a strategy within a big organization where carbon is just one of the many things that you're tracking and measuring across the organization. And so we get super excited about helping our customers see the unseen and to ground that into really high quality data. Frankly, when we started the organization, we were shocked that these global average emissions factors were really the only option available to most companies. And to Maggie's point, that's a great place to start. It's a very sound place to start. But what about when you're like, Maggie and Anna in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of your decarbonization journey, and you're really looking to make continuous improvement over time? Well, then you need the ability to customize and to create deeper, richer models. And we really think that data is the foundation for companies to be able to not just start their climate journey, but really to accelerate it.
And really seeing that progress as a collective is so exciting and something that it's great to celebrate in these moments all together, because we know there's so much farther to go, but really, each chapter of the story is getting us closer and closer there. Maggie, I'd love to bring in your perspective. Kind of a piece of that journey for your company has been upcycled certification. So really, as you think about stepping into that with the products that we discussed a little bit ago, how has Upcycled Certified been both a internal and an external motivator within the work and the innovation that you do?
Yeah, our internal teams have been incredible at innovating and problem solving and playing a role in identifying those upcycled opportunities. And I think having the upcycled framework really brought a lot of like clarity around what we were doing, and being able to say like this is a certification and kind of explain the program in that way. It's been a really helpful educational tool. And beyond that, I think it's helped us a lot on the measurement side, even on just the like figuring out the amount of pounds that we're upcycling. I think I forget, it's like however many millions of pounds we've upcycled has been, such an incredible story and such like something to motivate our teams of, the actions that we're taking add up, and this really does make a difference. I think that has been just really important internally as a motivator there. And externally, upcycling like Anna said, it's nothing new, but I think the term and the knowledge of it is definitely increasing. I think it's, becoming more well known, and being able to say not only that we're upcycling, but that we have the certification to prove it. And it's not just, something we're saying because it sounds good, but, really something that we are putting into practice, I think has really added that legitimacy to our efforts and just helped us with the storytelling piece there.
There's just so many moments of reflecting on where it just makes sense. It really is. The certification rolled out to Joyba, 1 year alone, 265 tons of sweetened syrup rescued, right? For one product in one range. There's just so much potential out there. And Anna, I'd invite you to reflect on, certification. You've been with us since the beginning, since launch 5.5 years ago, and kind of talked about it's a different conversation to different stakeholders, whether it's a buyer versus a customer. Kind of how has certification played a role in that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think just building awareness and around something that is, I mean, I've never met one single person, and I don't think anyone here has either, who's like, oh yeah, let's waste more food, I mean, it is one of the very few things that literally everyone on earth can agree on,
Yeah.
And so that having a certification kind of almost like as a jumping off point for, a global agreement on a topic that is better from a business perspective, better from an environmental perspective, better from a moral perspective is just incredible. I mean, I don't think we think, we're all sort of in it day to day. So like thinking about it that way might not be like the first thing that comes to mind, but sort of the collective community around fixing something is, one way in which it's really important. Like it signals we are, we as a group of people who get the certification are working on fixing something. And that is, that's a huge differentiator. And also just validating it with the certification and obviously, in our case, additionally with the LCA, means that it's real. And consumers want that, I mean, legal teams who are responsible for scope 3 want it too, and they want to know it's real, but people want that. And so I think that it's a way to be inspired in addition to validating what you're doing.
Well, it's such an exciting moment to mark in Upcycled Food Month this year, and that the third version of the standard that guides Upcycled Certified is launched, is live. So welcome you to go check that out with the Where Food Comes From team. It's an exciting moment in that evolution and maturity as the standard becomes more and more global every day. Miranda, I want to bring your perspective into this. And really, we've spent the last 2 days in my brain really deeply into the science that is guiding the upcycled food movement globally. As you've worked with UFA members across all sorts of different products and ingredients, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you've seen in lowering product emissions? And what is the impact of upcycled ingredients within LCAs?
Yeah. The number one thing that we see across every LCA that we do and all of the results is that ingredients are the biggest component of a product's environmental footprint. We have a lot of ideas and concepts about like packaging is a really big area, and transport and sourcing locally and all of those things. And it's true, they make a difference, absolutely. But the ingredients are by far and away the biggest component of every environmental footprint. And while transport as an industry is a huge, huge component of global greenhouse gas emissions, and the same for the development of plastics and packaging and things like that, when you look at a product itself, it's what you put in the product that makes a difference. So finding a way to actually make an impact on those core ingredients and the way that you're processing those things is how you're going to make a really big difference. So swapping an ingredient for something that's upcycled is a immediate and tangible and frankly sometimes simple way to make a really big impact on the formulation of a product without having to make a really big change in the way that you're processing something or other parts of the production of a product that are sometimes more challenging. That's the biggest thing. Another thing is thinking about like how can you reduce waste in your own production, right? Like what are things that are what are co-products or byproducts that you're making that instead maybe you could use, or even if you can't use them yourself, is there a market for those things? We worked with some companies that produce brewer spent grain and from breweries, and the grain that would usually be landfilled or given to animal feed or whatever that might be, they themselves have no use for it, but they can sell it to a bakery who might be able to use it to make bread, or they can sell it to someone who is interested in making pasta or whatever that might be, because it turns out that it's really high in protein. So even if you yourself can't use the waste of your product, maybe someone else can. And that's actually a really good way to lower the footprint, not just of that product that's made out of the otherwise wasted food, but of your own, because you're no longer producing this waste. That gets reflected in an LCA. There's a co-product now that you're producing, and so you can tangibly and quantifiably measure the impact of that. So it's really not just using upcycled products alone, but also helping to promote the market for upcycling generally.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that's kind of the magic and the secret sauce of the UFA community, right? Those conversations and collaborations are happening in real time. On our Refed webinar, which kicked off Upcycled Food Month, we were on with Pipcorn Heirloom Snacks, talking about exactly that. Their main product was producing the corn flour. They innovated a new product around that based on their LCA data that they had developed with you. And then they're, in collaboration talks about where some of those other co-products can go within the member community. So really seeing how that all connects in real time. And I think I've been reflecting a lot recently at the pathway of certifying ingredients and how that can help ease the journey of certifying products that come from those ingredients and just making that unlock and ease really available to the broader industry. So I think when we think about, that collaboration, Anna, and how, you as a brand working alongside other brands, how have you seen and learned from how you use this data, how you tell the story, kind of talk about that peer learning journey, what that's been for you?
I mean, we've been part of the UFA community since the beginning, and I think, building something is always just great. Reviewing the first, the first documents and all of that. But in terms of sort of really thinking about like how it works at a bigger scale, I mean, obviously impact for us is the first pillar of our business. And the conversations and collaborations over this last year with Custom Culinary have just been kind of, really a game changer in, obviously for the business, but in realizing that this sort of dream we had that it could become, an industrial scaled prod solution. And Maggie and Del Monte are a good example of this as well, where established food industry is really looking at upcycled, as an impact perspective, down the line, as a, potentially a money saving perspective if you bring it in house and you look at your own operations. So I think that the potential for scaling these impacts using the data is incredibly exciting and starting to happen, much more. And 5 years from now, let's hope it's 10x in terms of, business opportunity and impact. I think that any time of transition is a really interesting time. I mean, people always, I worked in the art world for a long time, and people always say, what, it seems so different. And it's like, no, actually kind of the same. Like, it's very creative. It's kind of like New York in the 1950s, it's a pretty small community right now. People are working together a lot, sharing ideas, stealing ideas, collaborating, being on panels together, doing the research, doing the science. But kind of ultimately all working toward the same end. So I mean, people talk about collaboration, and sometimes it feels really generic. Those conversations like, oh, we need to collaborate more. But if you look at this community around upcycling and data on impact, there is real collaboration that's often pre-competitive. And I think that's really unique and very exciting, and also one of the reasons why it's moving so fast.
Doing more together than we can alone, and the generosity of spirit that everyone, I think, exemplified by this call brings to that. And, I think for folks thinking about where do I even start, right? If they're thinking about the concept of upcycling, thinking about what is their role in this, what advice would each of you have for those companies that are thinking, okay, we want to target, we want to measure, we want to act wherever they might be in that progression? Kind of what advice would you have? And Maggie, start with you.
Yeah, I would build off of Anna's point around collaboration, and especially in our case, internal collaboration was so key to getting this sort of project and this type of work off the ground. Um, as a sustainability person, maybe I've got the idea and the passion, but I'm not in the plants every day. I don't see, where the opportunities are, where the waste streams are. So getting the right people together to share those ideas and to start to identify the opportunities and to problem solve, I think is the best place to start.
Other additions? Anna, Julia, Miranda?
Yeah, I mean, start somewhere. Like,
Just
I
start.
mean, don't let like the data get in the way of don't let your internal sort of, oh my God, I've got to have everything perfect and I have to know every detail before I start this thing and before I prove this thing. Do a pilot, try it, get it done on a small scale, and that will show you a lot about what you can do. And I mean, use the data in that way, but don't let it get in the way of getting started. I guess I would say that, because I think that it's always, I mean, obviously if you're an emerging brand, it's much easier to move more quickly than if you're, a brand that has manufacturing all over the place and many people and many layers and all of that. But there's you got to find that thread of people that will get permission, or take that time, or just have general interest in fixing something. And so you can start small. You can start with 50,000 pounds. You can do some experiments. You can do an LCA right just on that. And once you have a little bit of internal data, you can then look at your larger operations and see how you can integrate it across your channels, across a line of products. And that's true for big business and small business. And as Miranda said, swapping out one, I mean, I might disagree with it being easy, because it isn't always easy, but swapping out one ingredient is a way to lower your footprint and a way to try something out. And whether that's just from your impact perspective or flavor perspective, or, communications around what you're doing, or if the most important thing is internal goals around impact, and you don't like the word upcycle, just do it because that's where you need to go. So yeah, just don't wait. That's my advice.
Create those
Get
stepping
moving.
stones,
Get
step
moving.
at a time.
I agree with Anna. Like, don't wait and don't be afraid to start. I think the other thing is don't feel like you have to be perfect to get started. Some of us are the type of people who clean our houses before the housekeeper comes. I'm certainly that person. And often we'll come into organizations who feel like they have to have all of their country origin of data in a perfect spreadsheet, and they have to have, supply. And you'll get there. You can't fly into flying. You have to walk, you have to crawl, you have to run before you get to that point of maturity. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't feel like you have to have all of your ducks in the row before you reach out to a partner. And then to our earlier point around collaboration, talk to other brands who are at a similar stage to you, or maybe one stage ahead of you in terms of growth. Reach out. I think our industry is far more collaborative than we give ourselves credit for sometimes. And often your counterpart in a peer organization may be willing to tell you who they've worked for, how they've approached certain data challenges, or maybe even willing to partner on some of that supplier engagement that we're seeing as an industry trend right now. So don't feel like you have to be perfect to get started. And like Anna said, just start.
Knock on those doors, have those conversations. There's so much that can really unlock. I want to just maybe ground us in a little bit of the tangible as we wrap up here, Miranda. If folks think about, starting on their assessment journey, kind of what are some of those building blocks that your team might ask for them to bring to the table that they would need to be prepared for?
Yeah. We have made every effort to make the process as simple as possible. So our team has built in a lot of defaults and areas where we can make key assumptions so that we can really just focus on the pieces that we need. So our minimum data requirements are incredibly low compared to a lot of other providers. Our minimum data requirements are, we want to know what the ingredients are that you're using and the formulation, and an overview of your processing steps. And that's pretty much it. Like in terms of key areas there's a ton that we can do beyond that. And we're able to customize our models in a million different ways. We want to know if you have the information about source locations, specific energy that's being used, all of those different types of things, the what happens to waste streams, what your distribution links look like. But if you don't have that information, we're able to backfill it. So like Julia said, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have every piece of information, especially for people who are using commands or whatever it might be. It might be really challenging to get really detailed information about your product, but we're there to work with you to make sure that you have reasonable estimates for things that you can estimate, and that we make sure that we emphasize these are the pieces of information that we absolutely need to have in order to have a tangible outcome.
Amazing. Thank you. Such good guidance, and a lot to reflect on here as folks walk away and think about what is that next step? Where do I start today? Where do I start tomorrow? And how do you really celebrate that? So I want to thank you each for taking time to share your perspective, to share your journey. I know our attendees and folks watching this down the road will be really inspired to reach out and collaborate ahead. So thank you all.
Thank you. Always great to.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
I want to just wrap us up with a few moments to mark where we are and mark where we're going. In that, this is a part of our Upcycled Food Month celebration, June 2025, really as a moment where we celebrate the entire movement and the entire industry. So really reflecting on, where you fit into this community. We've got a seat for everyone, whether you're an individual that's passionate about this topic, a student looking to, take next steps in your learning journey in your career, or businesses. We've simplified the membership model and really want to make it as approachable to possible for folks that are just looking, where do I start today? Where do I take this tomorrow? And unlocking this collaboration that we've seen evidenced here in this last hour. So invite you to reach out, learn more as we are on this journey together. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your passion, for the good work you're doing every day, and look forward to our next conversation down the road. Thank you all. Stay well.